Welcome to Big Blend Radio with your hosts Lisa and Nancy, editors of BigBlendMagazine.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Big Blend Radio's Toast to the Arts show. Today we welcome back Victoria Chick. You know her every third Saturday. She's here on Big Blend Radio. She's a contemporary figurative artist, an early 19th, 20th century print collector, and she's also the instigator for the development of the Southwest Regional Museum of Art and Art Center that is being formed in Silver City, New Mexico. And Silver City is in the southwest corner of the state. It is beautiful. It's home to the Gila Cliff Dwellings National Monument. It's home to the Gila National Forest and the Gila Wilderness Area. In fact, it's one of the very first wilderness areas in the country. So I encourage you to go to Victoria's website, go to victoriachick.com, and also to learn more about the Art Center, because we just want to keep talking about this Art Center that's being developed. It's an amazing project. Go to swrmart.org. And Victoria has an exhibit coming up in Las Cruces. And so we're going to talk about the exhibit, and we're going to talk about where the exhibit is being held, which is the Branigan Cultural Center. So we're going to not only have Victoria, but we have a special guest, Jennifer McClung, joining us. She's the acting exhibits manager and museum curator for exhibits in the various Las Cruces museums. But first, welcome back, Victoria. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I am just feeling great today, and I'm glad to be here talking to you.
Well, we're excited about you going back to the Branigan Cultural Center. I mentioned you've been there before with an exhibit, and you mentioned you're going back. And last time you were just raving about the center and how cool it is, and looking into the center and all the museums, it looks like a really good destination for travelers going to Southwest and Southern New Mexico. So very excited to have Jennifer join us. How are you?
I'm
welcome.
Great. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
We're excited about you. And I want to give everyone the website for the Branigan Cultural Center. It is Las-Cruces.org, and that's CRUCES, Las Cruces. So it's Las-Cruces.org. And when you're on there, it's the city website because it's all city museums. And you click on museums, and then you'll find all these really cool museums. So Jennifer, these museums are all free for visitors, right?
They are, yes. As part of our service to the citizens and visitors of the county and the city, we provide these. We don't charge any entrance fee, and people are welcome to come anytime.
Very
That's
cool.
Nice.
Yeah, so there's four: the Museum of Nature and Science, the Museum of Art, Branigan Cultural Center, and then a railroad museum too. You can go choo-choo.
Yes. And yeah, we're open. What are we open? Tuesdays through Fridays from 10 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon, and on Saturdays from 9 in the morning until 4:30 in the afternoon.
Nice. Oh, very cool. And before we were recording, you were saying that the Museum of Nature and Science, the Museum of Art, and Branigan Cultural Center, aren't they all connected?
Yes, they're all just within really close proximity to each other. So we say that they're next door neighbors to each other. So if you visit one, you can visit all three. And then if you want to go a mile to the west of us, you'll come across the railroad tracks and the railroad depot.
Nice.
Very cool. So Victoria, you've been on display there. Well, your art has been on display.
Victoria was a conductor of the railroad.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Victoria's hanging out at the Branigan Cultural Center. But isn't it cool to have these museums there for people coming in to see your art? They get to kind of have like a really cool, I would say, more than day trip when you have that many museums.
Well, I know you do, and I've taken advantage of that twice now, because when I delivered my work, 2 years ago, it was a really nice trip. I mean, it takes a while for us to get there, and to be able to see that many museums so close together is really wonderful, and I appreciate it because at the time, Silver City, while it's an art town, it doesn't have a fine art museum. It has a good history museum, though. But that's one of the reasons that I'm trying to work on getting a building, a fine art museum in Silver City. But the more museums there are in the whole Southwest, in reasonable proximity to each other, just helps everybody. It helps each museum, and it's a wonderful experience for anybody who visits. And I think it's good for the community too, to have visitors come from distances to see these museums. It's
Absolutely.
like the Branigan. I mean, that's wonderful. It's a cultural museum, so you see aspects of New Mexico, aspects of the region that if you're a visitor you might not know otherwise. And if you're a resident, you get to appreciate your area more. So I just think it's wonderful. Whoever came up with a cultural museum for Las Cruces really did a service to the whole community.
I think it's cool. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the Branigan's is interesting because we have 3 distinct galleries. So while it's one building, we are able to offer 3 different exhibits within that one building. So that gives us a lot of flexibility in the types of exhibits that we offer and what topics they cover. So the Branigan is really a nice place to, sometimes we do a public call for art where we for proposals, where we get proposals from the public, which is how Victoria first came to us. And so that brings in a lot of community-driven exhibits. So there's a lot of community interest, but then like Victoria was saying, visitors who come get to learn as much as the locals do sometimes about the history and culture of the area. So the Branigan is really a really interesting building, and it's a historic structure that was built in 1935 in the Pueblo Revival style. So it's also architecturally a very interesting building.
Nice.
So yeah, because a Pueblo style, that's something that's really so New Mexican. You know what I mean? When you go to New Mexico, you want to have that authentic feel. And wasn't it the very first library building in the city?
Yeah. The woman who founded it, I can't remember her name, but her last name was Branigan.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
That's good.
and she did it to commemorate the memory of her husband. So she contracted with a prominent El Paso architect and helped with the design and got it laid out. And it was the library for, let's see, from like 1935 until like the 1980s, I want to say. And then the new Branigan Library got built. So it's got a long, and there's still people who come in and remember using that building as a library, but it's still got some of the original stained glass from when it was a library that has some of the children's story images that are in stained glass, like Tom Thumb and the little girl with the shepherding of lambs and stuff. So it's still got a really a close association with its history as a library, as well as its new venue as a cultural center.
It's also neat that it's next to the Museum of Art. So
yes,
is that contemporary art, fine art, or is it kind of a mixed kind of, I mean, because you could have sculpture, you could have everything in there,
We could have.
Yeah,
we can have anything there. Actually, it's essentially a 3,000 square foot space that has kind of freestanding walls that we can move as we need them to. So we have accommodated ceramic exhibits. We've accommodated traveling exhibits. Right now, we've got an American Impressionism exhibit that features 41 American Impressionism artists that we have as a traveling exhibit. And the exhibit that's coming up in the fall is dealing with icons and symbols of the borderlands, which deals exclusively with regional borderland artists. So we have nothing that is off the table with regards to what we can show in the Museum of Art. So it gives us a lot of flexibility in what we offer to the public, and they love it. I mean, whether it's a local artist that we're featuring or an international exhibit, it always is very popular to have that kind of flexibility, because what appeals to one person may not appeal to the other, but if we cover all our bases, everybody's happy.
Oh, there you go. That's, and I know, Victoria, you've had to have gone in the Museum of Art, because look at you starting a museum in Silver City. This is kind of a nice, because you're not that far from Las Cruces, and, you've got the main interstate going through there, and you've got the Gila Cliff Dwellings. There's a City of Rocks State Park, and then in between, right? And then here in Las Cruces, you've got White Sands National Park right there. And you've got Carlsbad Caverns that's not so far away. Even Guadalupe Mountains National Park's not that far. And so I look at this for travelers. There's days where you're out in the parks and hiking, and especially if you're a family, you kind of want to have a day where, all right, what if it's raining? I know that's rare, but New Mexico could use some rain.
Yes.
Yes,
really
we can.
could use some. Yeah. But I think it's a great way for, people. Like, even if you go to White Sands, to go to like the Museum of Nature and Science, first, it kind of helps you get the lay of the land. And when you're in a town, to go to the museums first, I just always think it's a good starting place. It's almost like a visitor center, and giving you some of the cultural history, the natural history is so important to really understand where you are, when you're hiking,
Yeah, our Museum of Nature and Science deals with all the creatures and plants and critters that you find in the Chihuahua Desert. So we have live animals on display that represent the kind of creatures you would find in the area. So kids love it. It's a good place to take children, and so they can learn about animals and things like that. And we also talk about the trackways, the prehistoric dinosaur tracks that are on the mountains. I forget where, kind of to the northwest of the town. So there's a lot of things that parents can take their kids to if they don't want to visit and see American Impressionism art.
And I forgot about the Chihuahua Desert. My head always goes to Sonoran, because we lived in Tucson, and like Tucson's not that far, and El Paso is not that far. So you're really in this amazing, you've got, Las Cruces, this is really important. It has one of the best rest areas in the country, because it is home to the giant Roadrunner.
That is true.
Yes. It is the best roadside attraction.
It is.
Seriously, you've got to go see that. So when you go to Las Cruces, you must go to the rest area, and you must go say hello to the Roadrunner that's made up of, isn't all this recycled
materials? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Everybody's got to go there, man. We will pull over just to go say hello.
Well, and you get a wonderful view.
But,
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, you get a wonderful view of the Mesilla Valley, and you get to see how the valley is surrounded by these chains of mountains. And if you're into geology at all, it's really cool to look at the community from that visitor station.
Yeah, because you've got some green. It looks very fertile, like at certain times of the year when we've been through there and stopped. It looks very lush and green. Aren't you growing chilies, or you're growing pecans, or what's going on?
Yeah. We still grow the chilies down in this area. There are pecan
Ooh.
farms that are still harvesting pecans in this area. And the greenness kind of depends on when the water is released from the Elephant Butte Dam into the Rio Grande, because that's how they get all their water for their crops. So from like mid-April through like July, it's really green, because we're getting the water release into the Rio Grande.
Wow. So when you're traveling, you go from Las Cruces up to Silver City, and that's a beautiful drive, because you do start to go up in elevation, right, Victoria? So are you still part of the Chihuahua Desert or not? I'm all thrown around.
Silver City on the way up is still considered part of the Chihuahua Desert. Probably by the time you get up to Silver City, you're running out of it
Yeah.
because you're running into a lot of junipers and pinyon pine. But below that, it's a lot of flowers, a lot of vegetation. Sometimes at certain times of year, it doesn't look very exciting, but any kind of rain, it just comes to life, and you see lots of flowers, and it's always interesting to me. And then another thing that's really interesting to me is the Rio Grande. I mean, it changes so in such a way that whether it's wet or whether it's dry, I always find it interesting because of the way it meanders and the way the channels are. Sometimes have lots of water. Sometimes there's nothing, but I find it fascinating because whether you see the water or not, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
It's subsurface, but it's supplying it's supplying life to that whole area.
That's amazing when you think, it's going through the City of Rocks, we should bring up too, and this ties into your exhibit. And so Victoria will be there on display.
Yes, there she goes again.
I know, Victoria is always on display. Her art is on display from July 29th through September 25th. And the exhibit is called Symbols of New Mexico, A Personal Experience. And I remember you painting that, actually. I remember having dinner at your house when you were finishing this up. And with this exhibit, it's really, we love your art. We love Victoria's art. And so go to victoriachick.com to see. But tell us a little bit about the symbols, because is this statewide, or are you thinking more when you're in your art, is it more southern New Mexico or statewide? Or tell us a little bit about the symbols.
Well, there's more emphasis on the southern half of New Mexico. The symbols. Well, there's two kinds of symbols. One is a symbol for me. It's kind of I use anthropomorphism quite a bit with my cats and my horses, who kind of represent me in looking at everything that I find interesting about New Mexico. So there's some of that as a symbol, but there's a lot of things that you see in New Mexico that are striking when you're coming from another geographic area. And some of them are big, like mountain ranges. Some of them are tiny, like the tiny plants that blossom. So I have made some of my paintings are tiny paintings, like 6-inch squares mounted onto another painting. So it's almost like a label of what I'm seeing. So it's kind of hard to explain, but I hope that people will enjoy the show, and that some of the symbols that are exciting for me will be recognizable and exciting to them and the experiences that they've had in New Mexico.
I think it's neat that you're doing this exhibit, in the Branigan Cultural Center, right? But it's next to all these other museums, because it really ties. It's like the complete package. You know what I mean?
Right.
It really is. And horses, that is a big deal in New Mexico, even northern New Mexico. Nancy, remember when we got lost? Which time is more like it, right? We got lost up near Gallup, and we saw these little ponies, they were like wild, Victoria, up by Chaco. They were just it was like wild horses, but they were small. So I don't know what, what breed, but, or if they were wild, but they looked pretty free to me. But they are part of New Mexico, the horses and the cats. Well, they get to look out and so birds.
There's a lot of animals that are natural, of course, but natural animals that were brought in sort of like in the 1800s, maybe a little, early 1800s even, where they became basically feral, and they're like herds of horses as an example, or burros that were used. Well, Some of them were used in mining. Some of them escaped. Some of them were let go. And so herds formed. And every once in a while, the Bureau of Land Management or the National Park System gets nervous about introduced animals, and so they will round them up and try to find homes for them. In some cases, they will auction them off, and a lot of people buy them and turn them into really nice using horses or using animals. There are other methods that they use to try and keep the population down, and so there's some controversy about that.
Yeah.
But,
there always
anyway,
has been across the West.
But this is part of, these animals are part of history to me, and so I get a little sad. Or worse, when I hear about them being perceived as detrimental to the land.
That is a whole other show, but I agree. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to change the word feral to independent.
Yeah, that's
okay.
That's wild is good. Wild and independent. When you look at horses, they really are amazing creatures.
That is a whole other connotation. And a better one.
Yeah, and speaking of horses, I'm looking at one of your paintings, New Mexico Horse Stream, which I love. And you were just talking about those channels, like there's that, they really lead you, because you really show New Mexico, because there's parts of it that do represent prairie land in a way, and you wouldn't think that, but it's a huge part of, like, I think it's Otero Mesa that they really had to protect. And
that particular painting, Lisa, that was the inspiration for that. It's the fact that I ride a lot, and that area is within a couple of miles of my house. It's on the old Fort Bayard, and you know how rocky the land is in most places. And when I got to Fort Bayard, there was this wonderful grassland. I mean, there wasn't a rock on it. And, and I thought, well, this is a dream spot for the horses around here, because they can eat, they can run, and they don't have to worry about the rocks. But I thought, I was wondering why. I wondered geologically why that was void of rocks. Was it a geological reason, or was KP duty back in the 1800s? Did that include picking up rocks rather than peeling potatoes? So I don't know really what the reason is, but I know that my horses always appreciated riding in that area.
That brings up a good point about, I know you do those trail rides and these wilderness areas, and you think about how rocky it is, and horse hooves, I know we've done shows on that where some people don't put shoes on their horses, some people do, but I got to think, like, what was it like way back when Billy the Kid was on horseback? Carson, they were going through the state, on horseback. I mean, were they shoeing their horses? I know there was blacksmith shops and everything, so all that was around, but you got to think about what those horses went through when people were on them all the time. They were transport.
People.
And wars,
they were probably good owners and bad owners then, like there are now. But I think horseshoeing is a very ancient art, and I think most people, if they had horses back then or mules, would have taken advantage of a farrier or a horseshoer, as they call them then, maybe.
Yeah.
But
you got to think about. You're right. It is an art.
I tell you what. When I ride over in old Fort Bayard land, I find old shoes, and they're most of them are mule shoes. They're worn and they're rusty, but they've probably been there for 80 or 100 years.
Wow. Yeah, from the mining times too. And Fort Bayard was a fort, and maybe they did clear it. I was just thinking about the rocks. Maybe they really did clear it out at that point, because there was also the hospital there too.
Yes.
So
Some
maybe
of those old buildings are really fascinating, and there's a museum at Old Fort Bayard that is one of the restored officer houses that's really interesting. It's not open all the time, but every once in a while they'll open the whole fort and have a kind of festival where people will, carry out activities that might have been done, at the turn of the century. The last century, not this century.
All right.
Cool. Well, I love that, this is so New Mexican with what you're doing, again, tying into Branigan, and, it just goes, it has that vibe, it's like here, but I love somewhere near Buckhorn, that painting with the cat looking over the mountains, because, we watch all here where we are right now. Well, actually, when this airs, we'll be in Arkansas playing with donkeys. But anyway,
oh boy,
That'll be fun.
And his name is Luke, so he's cool and Luke. Donkeys and dogs and armadillos. But where we are right now, we've got our big indoor kitten, Koozie, the Maine Coon, and then we've got wild, what I was going to say, independent cats outside. Let's put there.
Yes.
Use your word, Nancy. And but you watch them watch each other, and we see them up on the fence, and they do that look exactly like your painting somewhere near Buckhorn. And I think that's what's so special about how you have cats in your paintings. And sometimes I have to explain it to people, Victoria. She's like the cat lady, but it's not like you're doing cat portraits. It's these moments. I mean, that's what a figurative artist is. So can you explain that part of it about how you manage to capture their movements without being so detailed either? It's just like you can feel the movement. You can feel exactly how that cat is looking down at the mountains.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Body language is that way. I mean, because I think some of the animals, particularly cats, for me, they adopt or they use a lot of the muscles and their body language in certain situations is very similar to the kind of body language a human being would have. So I think I'm attracted to them kind of for that reason. I can identify with their body language, whether it's scary or if they're warning somebody or they're relaxed or whatever. They are very I'm sorry. Their body language speaks. It's truly language to me for that reason.
Yeah, it is. I mean, could you imagine, there's been all these interesting movie star trials going on, right?
Yes.
I've been keeping us all entertained. But I was just thinking, because, the body language of cats. Now, imagine if they were in trial. Like, how, Nancy, you love that painting of the dogs playing pool, but if the cats were
they're playing poker.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, poker.
Yeah.
Now, if you had the cats in there, in like running, the lawyer cats and the judge, could you imagine a judge cat, like the judge sitting there and looking at, see, Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Yeah, you're getting me ideas. Now cut that out.
I know, but it's fun. It's kind of like, it's cats are they're just a whole other, I don't even think they belong in the typical animal mammal species thing. I think they have their own planet somewhere. I do believe that.
Oh boy.
I do. They kind of rule the world. So I love what you do with them, because you're like, yep, we know exactly what's going on there. So, but this is exciting. How many paintings are going to be on display?
Well, that's up to Jennifer. I give her the paintings, and she works her magic with arranging them. And that's one wonderful quality to curators, and she's a great curator, is that they know how to make any exhibit look its best. So I really appreciate Jennifer.
Oh, well, thanks. Yeah. No, actually we had we had Victoria back in 2020, but the exhibit was open like 2 weeks before COVID shut it down completely. And
Oh.
I was very upset about that. So we actually had an opening this year, and I was like, what would be really nice is if we could bring Victoria back and show her art, because I love it. I think it's really unusual and unique.
Well, thank you. I'm really thrilled to be invited back. So
yeah. So it seems like we had like around 10 pieces or around that number when we did the show last time. So I'm guessing we'll probably have about that number. Her pieces, like the New Mexico horse dreams, is really, really big. So that, of course, limits the number of pieces that you can put up. But the nice thing about the New Mexico horse dreams is I don't know if she put gold gild on it or if she just used a gold paint. But when we were staging the exhibit, we were able to put a light on it so that the gold was like reflecting off, and it was the first.
It was pretty amazing.
Saw. It was the first piece you saw when you walked into the gallery, and it just really popped off the wall and looked really amazing. So her show is a lot of fun to put up because her pieces are so interesting, and there's like 3 different sizes, so it gives a lot of visual depth to the layering of the exhibit as well, which is really helpful.
Well, it's interesting about, curating an exhibit, and, it's fascinating to me. Do you go to like college for that, or is that something you learn as you go? I mean, how do you know what's going to work and what isn't? Like what? Yeah.
Experience mainly. Certainly most everybody in here has a degree, at least a bachelor's degree in either, public history or museum science or something like that. So you learn kind of the basics in that area. But for me, what I've been discovering is that it's essentially stage theater. When you're at a theater and you're watching a live performance and all the props and all the stages and everything that give you the feelings and emotions and settings, putting up an exhibit is a lot like that, because you're trying to evoke a mood or reinforce what the artist or the historian or whatever the topic of the exhibit is, to augment it or reinforce it or bring out a point while you're doing the lighting and the positioning of the pieces and the layering of the exhibits. So it takes an eye it takes an artist's eye almost, because you're doing it in a way that's got to be visually attractive to bring people in to the gallery and stay in the gallery. So that's what I've been discovering as I've been working here at Las Cruces for the past 3 years. It's really interesting. I really enjoy it a lot.
That's cool. Because Nancy used to do a lot of that with exhibits and art collectives, and hope that the artists wouldn't get mad about being next to other ones and things like that.
Well, yes, there is that sometimes.
There is that side of it. Yes, there is.
but that's
doing a show of many different artists is harder than doing a show of one group of work from one artist.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. Yes.
You're not only dealing with the work, you're dealing with the personalities, and so
I know
that can be difficult.
But it is interesting. It's fun, in a way. It can get a little challenging. This is true, but I always found it to be really interesting because, really.
well, Victoria, for you as the artist of the paintings, when you go and see how they've been curated and how they're on display, do you ever see something different in your art when that happens? Versus them hanging in your home or in your studio, and know what I mean? Do you see something like a different vibe?
I don't know that I see the individual pieces differently, but I'm always surprised at how and pleased at how they are arranged, because they're usually arranged in a way that I hadn't thought of, or it's always a surprise to me how a curator will work with my work, and it's always a play. I mean, I have to say I've never had a bad experience, because curators know what they're doing, and they're seeing my work for the first time, usually in person, and so how they react to it is interesting to me. I mean, I how we're always saying, well, every viewer brings their own experiences to looking at a painting, and they will see something that the artist never intended. But that kind of happens, I think, when you turn your work over to someone else to organize and exhibit.
Yeah, I think it's neat. I think it's co-creative, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also really interesting because, like with the American Impressionism exhibit that we've got here at the Museum of Art, I was given thumbnail pictures of the paintings that were, maybe an inch by an inch. So I couldn't really quite understand what the pictures were, but I laid out the gallery preliminary.
Wow.
Based on those little thumbnails. But then when I got the pieces, it's like, oh no, this needs more space, or these that I put next to each other cannot be put next to each other. So, making those kind of adjustments, and also trying to pretend that you're the audience, and, that you've never seen this piece before, and how would somebody coming into this exhibit who's never seen this artwork before respond and relate to it. So yeah, it's really the process of doing an exhibit is really interesting.
It's got to be interesting doing sculpture, because it's like, and depending on the piece, obviously, right? But it's like, what do you see when you walk in, but you're going to turn around, you know what I mean? It's you walk around it or not, it's sculpture is interesting with that.
Yeah, we just in March we did the high school senior art exhibit for the first time in 2 years because of COVID, and there were a lot of ceramic pieces that were part of this show. And yeah, it's like, well, wait, if I back this up against this other piece, then you're not going to be able to walk around it. And does this piece really need to be seen 360 degrees, or is its front the only part of it that's interesting? So yeah. Sculpture presents its own unique little problems.
How is Las Cruces in regards to being like Silver City is an art community, and then it's got all the smaller communities connected to it in Grant County? What is Las Cruces like in regards to being an art destination? Are there more art entities? Are there galleries downtown, or is the museum complex the main part for art?
Well, it's really interesting. I've been to Silver City, and I love Silver City because of it's got a really different way of, kind of collecting up and promoting its artists through the galleries and through people knowing people. And it's really kind of an interesting dynamic that's up there. Here in Las Cruces, there's a lot of art, but it's almost more just artists doing their art because they're artists rather than trying to commercialize it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there are galleries. Certainly the Doña Ana Arts Council does rotating shows virtually every month, and they bring in some really interesting artists, local artists and regional artists. And we do have a number of galleries on the east side of downtown in the historic Mesilla district. But, it's a lot of people doing, what's the word? Not graffiti, but when they paint on things. What's that called? I can't remember.
Oh, like murals?
Yes, thank you. A lot of mural artists in town.
That's cool.
That do work. And then, the city has a public arts division that encourages putting public art in public spaces. So that's interesting as well. So we have art, but just in a really different way than Silver City. Or
yeah, Silver City is...
Victoria agrees with that, but that's what I see.
Yeah, I think the size of a town makes a difference.
That too.
I mean, you have a much more diverse economic situation in the Mesilla Valley than we've got up here. We have one, very few actual business. We've got an education business, we've got a hospital business, and we've got a mining business. And if you're not able to work jobs in those things, people do art, and they see that as a way to eke out a living. That may be a great living, but remember, we've got a big retirement community here.
Yes.
So there's a lot of people that have come from elsewhere, and I know art is a big thing for them. So I think that's maybe why we have so many galleries. And of course, gallery business is a very tenuous business in most towns. So we've got some galleries that last and last and last, and some galleries that start up and they're undercapitalized and they last a year or two. So there's kind of a flux that happens. But the dynamic of people doing art and trying to sell art is here, and they're working. Yeah. They try to work out ways to attract buyers. That's it sounds kind of self-serving, but it is because people have to live.
Well, it's a legitimate profession.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Right.
It just has, it's like musicians, they, if you're going to make your living doing some kind of artistic endeavor, you need to do what you need to do to get paid.
That's right.
Yeah.
Artists and musicians and authors should all be paid.
Yes.
Exactly. And paid well, because the arts, it's about originality and honesty, and especially, the integrity to art is such an important part of our lives. And art is what documents history to me better than anything. It tells the truth. There's no lies in art. Because the artist, because you know what I mean. Well,
don't get carried away now.
This could be a philosophical discussion.
I know. Satire and all sorts of forms.
You know what I mean, though. But so we're recording this, everyone, on Les Paul, the guitarist's birth anniversary, and the quote of the day that we posted up on Twitter is, "To this day, no one has come up with a set of rules for originality. There aren't any." So I give thumbs up to
Paul and Mary Ford.
Yes, see, there you go. So very, very cool. Well, I wish we were down there for your exhibit, and you never know. You never know how we twirl around and do detours. So, but I know our audience that are in New Mexico traveling through, those who live in New Mexico, definitely worth going to Las Cruces. And I think what's great about this conversation is it really showcases two regions tied by art. And we think about New Mexico and Taos and Santa Fe, and Albuquerque is really doing some amazing things too, especially public art wise. But when you think about it, I want people to know that the southern part of New Mexico has art too.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. We appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, New Mexico is the land of enchantment. New Mexico art is amazing. And, when I go back to the truth, right? New Mexico true. I mean, that's the beauty of the state, has kept its integrity so much. And so art is definitely a huge part of it. So everyone, the website, Keep Up with Victoria, go to victoriachick.com. And also for the Branigan Cultural Center, go to Las-Cruces.org. And from there, you'll be able to go to the museums and learn more about the city as well. And of course, keep up with us at bigblendradio.com. Victoria is on again every third Saturday. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. It's been a true pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. We enjoyed it.
Yay.
It was fun.
Okay.